Seer, our non-stimulant, thermogenic, and recomposition agent. Seer is a super cool product because it's going to help you utilize turning your white adipose tissue, which is for storage of fat, into brown adipose tissue, which is going to help with energy production. So this is great to use for a competition prep or in your weight loss phase. So you can stack it with a stimulant-based thermogenic, or you could also use it in your off-season or muscle building phase to help keep you lean and mean. Seer.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Pro Physique Code. We've officially kicked off our Fall into Fitness Transformation Challenge. So I think we're going to keep the open. It is still open if you want to register when you hear this. It's $50. We got over 100 meal plans, training plans, and a private support group. But I'm excited because we've never done a fall one, so we're going to see how that goes.
Yeah, I'm excited for it too. I actually opened up a couple spots for the guided coaching, and I'm really glad I did because I had a couple calls yesterday with some people who were just really, really cool. So I'm excited.
Yeah. So look, we're going to talk today a lot about training. The last podcast that we did, we talked a little about trends that we've been seeing in the coaching space.
That was two weeks ago.
2 weeks ago, and then the last one was more of a Q&A, right?
Yeah.
But it just now that it's on my mind, every time I go to a show or I see a show on NPC News Online, I go look at the numbers, and it's just getting crazy. I had a girl do a show in Texas, Heart of Texas, usually a bigger show. There was like 22 open bikini competitors. So yeah, it just and then Janet has her show this weekend, the Battle of the Bodies, and I'm just going to be curious to see the size of it.
Yeah, this upcoming weekend, well, it'll already have passed by the time this comes out, but this is the last qualifying weekend too to qualify for the Olympia. So I don't know if there's more than 2 pro shows this weekend, like maybe out of the States, but I know there's the San Antonio Pro and then Janet's Battle of the Bodies. And one list for the pros is like really big and the other one is pretty small. So I thought that was kind of interesting to see.
Yeah, that's kind of what happens with the contracts now. Used to a bunch of people wait. You can't wait. You kind of got to guess. You got to put your feelers out. You got to see who's going to be where. But my guess was everyone was dodging Romina because she's been waiting all year. And if you've been watching her, she looks incredible. And when she's on, she's tough. She's been top 5 or 6 in the world multiple times. She's one of those girls that when she's got it all together, she's very complete. So I think a lot of people were thinking about that. And then the San Antonio show, we'll see what I didn't even look at that list yet. Did you see the list?
I did, and actually, I don't think anybody on the list is currently qualified. So I think it'll be
Cool.
Yeah. So that'll be cool to see. Yeah, but Romina, she's so cool in the sense of I remember last year she literally came out the last weekend she could to qualify for the Olympia and won that show and qualified. So it'll be interesting to see if she does that again this year.
Yeah, the year before she was in first call outs at the Olympia, and she was in the top 5 at the Arnold. Like she was. And then she wasn't as good last year, but if she's taken all this time to come back better, and I've kind of been watching her stories and she looks really good. So when she's on, she fits that criteria so well. It'll be interesting to see. But I'm really curious to see how the NPC numbers look for that show because it's been small, these shows. So yeah. Anyway, so we're going to talk today. We got some really good questions about training, which is not a topic that we've covered specifically. So Evan, Lexi, I know you guys got a lot of questions. I'm sure there's a lot of repeats. So I don't know if you guys want to delve into something specific that you felt was like the most common thing.
Yeah. Why don't you start, Evan? Because I know you got a hefty amount of questions, but you're kind of our training guy. So I saw that coming. So yeah, you start with whatever you want to start with.
Yeah, I was pretty shocked the amount of questions I got. I almost put up a poll again yesterday too, to ask some more because I think I'm going to actually do some stories and try to answer every one of these questions individually because I all think they are good questions. These are actually really, really good questions. There's not too many repeats. And the biggest thing when it comes to training is it's very nuanced, right? Like you can put together the most perfect program in the entire world, but if intensity is not there, if form isn't there, then it doesn't really matter. So, I mean, some of the questions I got are like, what's the optimal amount of sets and reps to be able to do? Right. I mean, that is an impossible question to answer. I think people focus way too much on you need 20 working sets per body part or 18 working sets. If it's any more than that, it's too much. It's like, well, I mean, technically, yeah. But if you are training correctly, 18 working sets is ungodly high. Ungodly high. I can't imagine doing 18 working sets in a workout. Like I would be absolutely trashed. So there's a lot of nuance that goes into this. And I think that'll help a lot of people understand that it's not so black and white and that training actually is a skill. It's something you learn. It's something you progress in. It's something you pay attention to. So I think there'll be a lot of fun stuff to go over today.
Yeah, no, you nailed it with that. And that's why I always refrain from, well, I posted one yesterday, but that's so rare of me. I don't record myself training a lot and like put it on YouTube, or I don't do a ton of reels of training footage. And I feel like everybody always wants to see that, but it's also like, I don't know what value that's providing people. Cause I mean, they could follow that, but it's not like you said, Evan, it's so nuanced and very person dependent.
Yeah. So I thought we'd start off with a question that I thought I'd like start off with bangers and kind of controversial ones. I think those are fun to kind of get into here. Best way to measure natural progress. How to know when you've reached your natural potential. So I think this is a very interesting topic and twofold when it comes to that. Specifically, the part about when have you reached your genetic limit, and can training be a barometer for that? What do you guys think?
That's such a loaded question. I'll say this. Very few people actually reach their natural genetic potential because there is such a thing as the law of diminishing returns, but very few people are optimizing their nutrition, their recovery, their training within the first couple of years. Myself included. I think back to like when I first started lifting and I was like all in on like chest and arm day, but go to hell with a back or a leg day, right? And so
Oh yeah.
then the second half of my lifting career, when I actually got into bodybuilding, guess what I cared about? Back and leg day, to hell with arms, right? So I'll say, gosh, if you put everything, and I mean everything, excellent from the beginning, you get a coach, you're paying attention to nutrition, you are lifting intelligently, intensely, progressing, I'd say 5 to 7 years, you're probably starting to get to a place where you're not going to see significant visual differences over the rest of your life. But those first couple of years, man, it is just wild how vast the changes can be.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a hard question though, because like honestly, do you ever like reach your genetic potential? Because obviously there's going to come a point where it may appear that you're not progressing and you may think nothing's happening, but I feel like at that point there's still probably something happening. It's just happening at a very slow rate. But like you said, Paul, I mean, it's hard to even say. I mean, I don't think anybody can probably say they're 100% all in at all times. I mean, I think even if you feel like you are, there's probably always areas you can maximize and get better at. And I think one thing that a lot of us athletes fall into the trap of is, we get very complacent, and sometimes it is hard to call ourselves out and and to know when we need to push harder or do something different because we think what we're doing is working. So that is like a really hard question, but I think, yeah, like you said, the 5 to 7 years, like maybe that's a good gauge. But I mean, even I think then you're probably still progressing naturally. It's just at a very slow rate that you can't even really observe. It's like it would just be happening so slow.
Especially if you're dieting too frequently. So that's the other part of the equation. If you're competing every year, you're really kind of limiting your progress. The best natural bodybuilders, and I've coached some of them. So Brian DaCosta last year, I coached him a couple of years ago. He got his pro card. I coached him last year. He ended up winning the WNBF World Overall Championship. He's not competing this year. He's the best in the world. He wants to get better. He's not going to get better in 6 months. So he's going to take 2-3 years off and come back. And I think that's the attitude of natural lifters is, getting your hormones back, getting your performance back in the gym, taking a couple of years off between shows. That's a very kind of rare mindset in the sport, especially when it becomes your whole personality where you just go all in and that's all you do is bodybuilding. And this is where, drugs, hormones, whatever you want to call it, can augment the process and greatly shorten the length of time it takes you to improve. But your natural limit, gosh, if you're in your early 20s, who knows? I mean, you can really make some progress.
I mean, you can look at it, most open bodybuilding guys, right? Most of them don't meet their potential until their late 30s, early 40s. That's when most are kind of at their best. Now, granted, they're not natural at that point. But the way I read into this question is more of a, and I think it goes back to a lot of people are in the camp of you need to reach your genetic limit before you explore the PED side of things.
Yeah, that
And
makes
I
sense.
think that's kind of where the question kind of came from. Look, if you want to be natural, I think you should say natural. That's absolutely the case with that. I'm also not in the camp of thinking you have to reach your genetic limit before that's something that you want to look into. If the fact you're doing everything else right, you understand the consequences, you understand the side effects, you've measured everything out, you've had conversations with your loved ones, you do it smart, you have it monitored, and you have a goal and a reason why you're doing it. Like, I don't think you necessarily need to spend 5 to 7 years trying to max your genetic limit. If you are going to already go down that route, make sure you have everything your ducks in a row, make sure you know how to train, make sure all that stuff's good. And then if you want to go down that route, sure, go do it. But that's a personal decision for everyone when it comes to that. How you gauge that based on your training, I mean, geez. I mean, we're learning stuff all the time when it comes to training and diet and nutrition, right? Like, I mean, there's no way to actually know if
Well,
you've
and
ever
it's
reached your genetic
the
limit.
body is so dynamic too. Like what works at one stage of training won't work at another. Like you can
Mhm.
early on, you can make a lot of progress with higher volume and less intensity. But I find that the older I've gotten, I need more intensity, less volume.
Mhm.
Um, so it that also changes over the course of. So you can't just go, oh, this is the program that works. Stick with that forever. You've got to constantly be, and that's the thing about bodybuilding. It keeps you engaged because you try different training variables, like rep schemes. You try different like frequencies, 1 time a week, 2 times a week, 3 times a week. You try these different things and see what works. And you sometimes you strike gold and sometimes you go, no, this isn't working. But
Mhm.
I think the best bodybuilders are self-motivated to just you know, you made a good point, Lexi, about how as you make progress, the longer you make it, the slower it gets. But the thing is, it's on top of all the progress you already made.
Mhm.
So a little bit of progress when you've already made a lot of progress seems way more significant. And I think that's the era that I'm living in with my body right now. It's like I've I'm 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 getting the benefit of training for 30 years where like I don't have to be perfect. This is just what I look like now. And if I go really hard for a couple months like I have been lately, I notice a difference. And if I back off, I still look pretty damn good, right? So it's like that just like that your training age really helps because when we compete, we've seen it, Evan, we've talked about it before. When you take a first-time competitor, the first time they diet, they tend to lose a little bit of their muscle density, right? You wait a couple more years and they diet, they don't lose that muscle density. It sticks around a little bit better. And that could come down to, being more diligent with your nutrition and training, or it could just be about having that muscle for a longer period of
Yeah.
time. It's just more with you.
Yeah, I think a really good example of this is I have a natural client I've worked with for years. I call him like Natty Nate because Nate is a
Oh, and
freak
it's
of nature.
dense. Yeah.
Is so dense and hard that he will get drug tested every show he ever does. And it's hard to look at him and think he is a natural competitor. He is absolutely crazy. Now, this man has trained for 30 something years like a madman, right? It took us a, not the best placing at one show for him to let me take over his training, which now his back is still a lagging part, but it is far better, far better than it was before. Now, is it light years better? No, it's not light years better because Nate is pretty much pretty much reached his genetic limit about as far as he's going to go, but he's still able to make improvements because we've improved his training, how he trains his back, and that has made a difference. Now, is it like we're talking about, drastic, massive changes? His back double in size? No, because he's pretty much reached his genetic limit for the most part, but he's still able to make progress. So actually reaching that limit, I don't know when you actually would. So
Yeah.
what
Yes,
question you got, Lexi?
it's okay. So, a question I have that I wanted to answer first is, so how to tell if training intensity is high enough, especially when working lower body? So, I think the first thing that comes to mind when I think of how to know if your training intensity is high enough is, well, I guess two things. I know we talked a little bit about this last week, but I think it is very valuable to this is not me saying you need to go to failure on every set you do, but I think it is very valuable to know what failure feels like, to have somebody pushing you to failure every once in a while, so you can have that as a gauge and be able to kind of gauge your intensity based off of knowing what failure feels like. But I know another big thing that I encourage all of my clients to do, and I know I personally do, is recording yourself in the gym. That's not to say you have to record your entire workout, but sometimes just setting your phone up and recording a set that you're doing, a working set, and rewatching it and seeing and taking, inventory of how does your tempo look at the end? Is your tempo slowing down? How does your facial expression look? Like, does it look like you are being challenged? Because I've had times before where I'll film myself and I'll feel like it's really gruesome and hard. And then I'll watch the video back and I'll be like, all right, that didn't look as hard as it felt on those last couple reps. You could probably go a little bit heavier, Lexi, or you could have probably pushed for another rep or two. So I think training footage is really helpful if you're looking to gauge your own training intensity when you're on your own.
Yeah, I think when it comes to leg training, I don't think anyone can truly find what failure is unless they have someone show them and push them to absolutely true failure. That is the one body part that is almost impossible to get there on your own. I think once you learn that, then you can do things like lengthen partials. Like I did that this morning on the leg press with it because I didn't have anyone with me. And that literally fried me. Now, also, if you aren't like cussing from here to the moon and cramped over afterwards, you probably could have gone harder. But then again, it goes to frequency of training too, right? Like if you're training quads twice a week, you cannot do that multiple sets. If you do that, you will never recover in time. That's one of my biggest pet peeves I have with some of my clients is how I structure their training splits. And I'll have a heavy leg day, an upper body day, a rest day, then a heavy lower body day again. And they'll do a heavy lower body day, upper body day, and then heavy lower body day again. I'm like, that is not enough recovery. You are never going to recover in that time. You're just going to constantly break down the muscle. It's not going to recover. It's going to lead to injury. It's going to lead to poor recovery, or you're just not training hard enough to begin with. It's one of those two options on things.
Yeah, for me, training has been more around the evidence that's come out, about frequency. And what I've enjoyed is more frequency, less beating myself to hell, and feeling good every time I go in the gym. For me, that usually means I'm doing one set to failure per exercise, the final set. And that might even look like a set to failure and a drop set or, someone assisting me. But, that's it's a hard question to answer. How do you know if you're training intensely enough? For me, it was a very eye-opening experience to train with Lane Norton 15 years ago. Whenever, we first got to train together, I thought I trained legs hard. I was a bitch compared to Lane. And like you said, Lexi, with the videos, you think you're at a max, and then you watch the speed of the lift and oh, the thing about the lower body, Evan, is that your brain wants to quit way before the body. Your brain is like, hey, bro, yeah, that's good, man. You're feeling it. And you can do 20 more reps. And that's why it's good when you get a training partner that pushes you. You got to be careful. I'm not a big fan of the people that go and murder their friends the first time they've ever trained legs and have them do 30 sets. But there is definitely something to okay, push yourself really hard, then get out, go recover, come back, be stronger the next time. You should not be training if you are weaker every time you go in the gym. That's a good sign that you're not recovering. But, I will say that for the majority of my life, growing up, reading the magazines, getting my workouts from there, it was kind of pushed that one workout per body part per week, right? So we had an arm day where we did 30 sets of arms. We had a shoulder day. We had a chest day. Right? So we had these. And then Lane was the first person to show me the idea of training multiple times per week with the same body part, but different rep ranges, right? So like one day, Evan would be a heavy day. We'd call that a power day, lower reps, 5 to 10. And then the second time you train, it'd be more in the hypertrophy range, like, 10 to 20 reps, depending on the body part. You're going to recover a lot easier from the lower power day, less volume. And then you're going to get more beat up from the hypertrophy day, the higher reps, the volume. There's going to be more muscle damage on those days. So I would typically try to have more rest after the hypertrophy day, and then I could do the power day you know, and then have just maybe 1 or 2 days off for the body part. But that split, when I first got that in 2007 from Lane, where it was like hitting every body part twice a week, man, all of a sudden my physique took off again. It was almost like the newbie gains. But yeah, so it just depends where you're at. Now, if I'd started with that program the first week I ever started training, it would have been too much. You know, I probably couldn't have handled it. But you know, that's the thing about training. It's you got to meet somebody where they're at. You can't just tell them like, this is the program. Who knows what's best for you?
Yeah. And I mean, I think that we like made a good point about, I think every once in a while, I'm not saying, and I honestly don't believe you should have to be reliant on somebody to be there and to push you. But I think every once in a while, having like a training partner and just meeting up and pushing each other, that can be really helpful. Cause I think sometimes we all become a little complacent if we're just training alone, going into the gym. So having a training partner who's, you know, very similar in level to you, I think that can be helpful. Or like, I know when I first started getting into the gym, I had a personal trainer in person. Like I literally had 4 sessions with him. And that was so valuable to me because it really, you know, he not only taught me proper form and mechanics, but he really taught me how to push myself. And I still like reference that to this day. And that really kind of helped me to learn what true intensity was as well.
Yeah, and Paul, you bring up a really good point about the high rep and low rep ranges, right? Because especially when we talk about glutes, those are a mix of like fast twitch and slow twitch muscle fibers, which should be trained during different rep ranges on things. And another thing, like you brought up, that it's so important is, and this is my big issue with big box gyms and their trainers, to where their whole goal is to try to kill you, right? And we all know those trainers. It's like, you're going to leave in a body bag when you're done here. Well, like that doesn't help anybody. Like that doesn't help anybody. Do 30 sets to fail. Half that's going to be junk.
Yeah.
Half that's going to be junk, and you're not going to get anything out of it other than like tendonitis, right? So,
I will say, Evan, and you know, you've been around some of the best bodybuilders in the world. I've been around some of the best. There are some individuals who can handle more volume, and
oh, for sure.
it's you cannot, if you're not able to keep up with them, you have to stop. Because I've made that mistake before of trying to do, you know, legs with Doug and Brian DaCosta. Listen, those guys can handle some insane weights and volume and reps. But you know, Doug, to his credit, he's been training whatever 30 years. He's got a set of books with every workout he's ever done. So he's been training so long and actually just making slight incremental increases. If you look at his workout from 25 years ago to now, the difference is insane. But if you just look at it week by week, so if you're actually able to handle more volume, that's one thing. But we're talking about some of the most elite bodybuilders in the world. I'm sure, you know, and that's where the problem started for me. You know, I was looking at the Jay Cutler 21 sets of biceps routine when I was 15, 16 years old, not knowing that Jay Cutler is a elite bodybuilding human being who can handle more because his muscles more dense and whatever. B, they're also taking stuff. So, yeah, it's really about paying attention to what your body is responding to and just trying to get 1% better all the time.
Here's a good one. When to push and when to pull back in prep on training. So when to push the intensity and when to pull back on the intensity in prep.
Yeah, I got that same question too. I bet it was the same person. No, who wants to start with this one?
I mean, I would hesitate to pull back unless you notice for multiple days in a row your recovery is really bad. And this is, you know, this is something that I'll, you know, have my, you know, all of us with our dashboard, when the clients check in, we're getting their scores, their wellness scores. And so you'll start to notice recovery is starting to suffer, training is starting to suffer. And then we'll take a deload week, which can be super valuable. Think of it like a slingshot. Like if you're pulling that, you know, pulling that deload back, it propels you forward. It's hard mentally on your ego to go in the gym and prep. But I would say, you know, the closer you are to stage, the more frequent you need a deload, right? The further you are from stage, the less frequent. You know, I would say close to stage, maybe every couple weeks, and further from stage, you know, every 6 to 8 to 10 weeks, you could be fine. But for me, it's, you know, the thing I like to ask my clients is when you go in the gym and you pick up a 10-pound dumbbell and it feels like 30 pounds, that's when we need to think about taking some recovery.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you nailed it. When the weights that you can normally lift pretty efficiently start to feel way heavier, it's generally when you know you may need a deload or a couple of extra recovery days. Or I know I've had a lot of value in tapering down like training frequency with some of my athletes when they're a couple of weeks out. So like going from 5 days a week of training to 4 days a week,
Yes.
that can help. But I feel like prep is also a time where if you let it, the brain can get in the way and almost like you, if you know, oh, I'm eating, very low food, sometimes mentally, if you know that, it makes you just push less in the gym and you may feel like you need to deload when you don't. So I think that's part of it too. But the deeper you get into prep, usually the more frequent you're going to need deload, or you may need to pull back your training frequency a bit.
So to steal Paul's like Jedi mind trick quotes here, that's something I will actually do kind of earlier on in prep when the first food drops a little bit. And people will say, well, surprisingly, I'm still really, really strong. And I'll say, exactly, you're still strong because a lot of times in off season, when your food's up high, your training isn't necessarily the best. Your food can get to a point to where your training kind of suffers. And then when you get in that little sweet spot there, it's a good feeling. It's a good feeling. So I remind them of that a little bit later on in prep, and I find that really really helps with them, not necessarily on the volume that they can do, because look, when your food is low, your strength over time is going to go down, right? Like your weights are going to drop to a certain extent, but your overall strength should still be there, but your endurance is definitely going to be falling, definitely going to be falling. A thing that I like to do is when cardio starts getting pretty high and they start getting fatigued, then we'll pull out things like intensifiers and drop sets. Like, let's go ahead and pull those out. And then we'll get to a point too, to where we're more focused on fat loss. We really just need to get that last little bit off. And we know we're not adding any muscle right now. I try to get in their heads, listen, right now we're trying to maintain our muscle. We're not growing. We're trying to maintain what we have. So let's remember that when we go in the gym. Right now, the focus is fat loss. So let's put that intensity in the cardio. We still obviously want to still be training hard here, but don't go in there like you're putting on 10 pounds of muscle, because it's not going to happen at this point. And you have to kind of get that thought into your head. And then also too, like you say, I'll pull out like the glute trigger, group pump day, high rep day, definitely towards the end, because even though those aren't you don't get as much bang for your buck on that stuff as you do necessarily on the harder work days. So definitely reducing the volume is a big part of that.
Yeah, I would prefer quality over quantity.
For
And
sure.
then it usually gives them a little extra time too. If their cardio is high, it gives them a little bit of extra time to fulfill that.
Well, we
Sure.
talked was it last year? Yeah, we both competed last year. It seems like longer than that. Actually, all three of us competed last year, but a couple times you and I haven't actually got to try together and trained at MI40, and we were both at that point leaning out. And the discussion we had was like, for me, I'll go in the gym on the day and do my warm-up sets. And there's some days where you're like, whoa, these feel light. Okay, today I'm going to drop the weight. I'm going to go a little heavier. There are some days where you go in and you pick up a weight and you're like, oh, today's not the day. I'm going to focus maybe more on machines, maybe more on, mind muscle, a little bit less focus on like, okay, let the ego go away. Let's just focus on like getting good contractions and getting, good stimulus, but kind of auto regulating based on how I feel warming up. And there's actually some really good research on that. They had, a group of participants, they had to do multiple styles of workouts, but they were able to pick the first two of the week based on how they felt. And they made more progress than the group that was told they had to do 1 day strength, 1 day power, 1 day hypertrophy. This group got to go based on how they felt that day, and they made a little more progress. So there is, once you get to know yourself a little bit, you can auto regulate and go, you know, today's the day where, man, I'm putting 4 plates on the leg press and it feels like nothing. It feels like a feather. Let's put 6, let's put 8, let's go. And then vice versa. You walk in the gym and you feel like you're walking in cement. Maybe today is the day where you just focus more on, getting good reps.
Yeah.
I think this is something really important to touch on too, is so much of this stuff is nuanced. And what you said there, Paul, is absolutely the case with things. That isn't something that is easily quantifiable to people that haven't trained for a long period of time, who haven't done a bunch of shows. It's harder for them to know what it is to do. But what you have to understand is that's still something you're going to need to learn about yourself. So noticing those times and being able to differentiate, am I just being tired and lazy here, or does the weight actually feel heavy? Because there is a difference in there, and being able to be honest with yourself and know which camp you're in is incredibly beneficial there. It's
Yeah.
incredibly beneficial. So
Sure.
again, it's a skill. Like, guys, this is a skill. It's something that you learn over time and how to do. And starting to think about things like this will help you progress.
Yeah.
What you got, Lexa?
I have an interesting one. So, well, not really interesting, but I feel like it's very relevant. What is realistic progressive overload for somebody who's been lifting for 5+ years? She said 5 pounds a week on certain exercises seems unrealistic. So
Very unrealistic.
Very
Yeah.
realistic.
very.
I don't do it in terms of that. When I program weights for people, over the course of 6 weeks, I'm happy with a 5 pound, 10 pound increase, right? Because you got to imagine from a volume perspective, if they're doing, let's say, 6 sets of, I don't know, 50 pounds on a deficit lunge, right? Deficit step back, right? 50 pounds. And they're doing 8 reps. If I can get them to do 55 pounds for 8 reps, right? That's a whole lot more volume on that day than they were doing 6 weeks ago. So I do, you know, a progression where we're not so much trying to add weight every workout, we're building up and then starting back over and just making, like, you know, couple percent increase over the course. Now you do that over the course of months and years. Yeah. And I've had some people that were talented athletes that, you know, their numbers start to get silly on big bench, you know, squat, deadlift numbers. But yeah, it's definitely not every workout. When people talk about progressive overload, no, it's not about every workout. You can progressively overload if the next workout, let's say you did dumbbell curls for 3 sets for 25 pounds for 10. Well, next workout you do 3 sets for 25, for 10, for 10, for 11. You just overloaded, right? And it's not always about adding more weight. It's about just taking it a hair further, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I think people lose sight and almost like forget that like just adding weight is not the only way to progressively overload. I mean, you can add reps, you can slow down the tempo. You know, you could add a little bit of resistance if the exercise permits. So there's a lot of different ways you can progressively overload. But I mean, especially I think it comes down to what movement we're talking to. Because obviously, if you're performing a movement like barbell hip thrust, that's a lot more weight you're working with in total. So you're probably going to find that you are increasing the load and the weight that you're lifting a little bit quicker than something like bicep curls or, you know, dumbbell shoulder presses. I feel like that's one I hear about all the time from my clients. They'll be like, oh, I've been stuck at this weight for like months now and I can't get up in weight. And it's, you know, that is a little bit of a slower one to progress because you're working with less weight in total. Like loop cable kickbacks, same deal. You're not going to probably be adding weight on something like that every week, but you can continue to intensify the movement by adding in a rep or slowing down the tempo of the movement.
Yeah, and I mean, look at size of the muscle, right? Like if you're trying to lift something with your lateral delt, it's a small muscle. You're only going to progress so far on things like lateral raises too. You know, Paul, you hit the nail on the head too when it came to what is progressive overload. And I think people focus solely on the weight going up. Your body doesn't know the weight that you're moving. It has no earthly idea. It only knows the stress that it's under. And you can create that stress through a variety of different ways. You can do it by literally sitting in that lengthened position and pressing out of there and doing lengthened partials. You can do it by slowing the tempo down. You can do it by drop sets. You can do it by a bunch of different ways. That's why I like to program based off like reps in reserve more so than actual weights and reps. And this is one thing I try to get across to everybody. So let's say I program someone, it's a rep in reserve of 1, which is like 1 rep short of failure, but that's 12 reps for that movement. And you get to that 12th rep of that movement and you do that rep and you finish that clean and easy, keep going. Just because it's 12 reps on that doesn't mean you're at a 1 on the rep in reserve. You could probably do 4, 5, 6 more reps. Cool, go that. The next time you know to go up in weight with that. It's not just where people fall victim, and I think where people really, really get stagnated is they look at the weight and they look at the reps. Like that's what matters. Does it matter? Sure, it's like the scale weight matters, but does it tell the whole story? No, not remotely close to telling the whole story on things.
Well, and I think something else that's important to understand, people don't think of lifting weights as a skill, right? It's a skill. Your body, when you put a barbell on your back and you go down and stand up, that squat, there is so much going on mechanically in so many major muscle groups. A lot of times people think, oh, if I can squat more weight, I put on more muscle. That is incorrect. Your brain is learning how to fire those muscles in a manner most efficient. So you can actually just adapt your skill set better to a lift, your technique better to a lift without adding any muscle. So it's not necessarily like progressive overload means you're adding more muscle either. You could just be getting more adapted to a lift that is very skill based. You see it all the time with like people that are new to powerlifting. They'll do a 1 rep max on a squat. You give them a couple cues and they can double that, right? Because now they understand how to brace, you know, how to fire the certain muscles. So just, you know, the act of lifting itself, it's called the repeated bout effect. You get benefits beyond just adding weight. You're adapting your nervous system to things. So don't get hung up in progressive overload. I know that's a common thing, but if that was the only way to progress, none of us would make progress because we're all lifting. Listen, I've been using the same dumbbells for curls for years. Like it's not like I used to curl 35s and now I curl 125-pound dumbbells. I'm still in that 35 to 50-pound dumbbell curl range. But I think, you know, I do refine the shape of my muscles and look over time, but progressive overload, maybe at the beginning. I do remember like when I first started lifting, every time I would go in the gym, I could put on another 2.5, another 5. But again, how much of that was just technique getting better? How much of that was just, you know, so yeah, there's many ways to increase muscle without just constantly adding weight to the bar.
And I think this goes into camps too. And guys typically will be ego lifters and try to lift heavier than they should. Females, a lot of times, are way stronger than they actually think
I've
they
always
are.
said from the beginning, if you ever look at women in the gym, they have way better shoulders than men. Why? Because when men are trying to do laterals, they're like throwing them and it's all traps and they're swinging them. If you ever watch a female, for the most part, do laterals, they're targeting their medial delt. So they have these pretty round delts and men just have these beefy necks. And, you know, so yeah, women are much more kind of analytical over their lifting. They're worried about making a mistake. Man, and listen, I'm a victim of this. The other day I went in the gym and I was like, oh, I just want to do light dumbbells. I'm going to do my incline dumbbell press light. Maybe I'll go up to 80s. Kid next to me pulls out the 100s. I go to the 110s. Like that's male ego. I'm like, you got 100s? Let me show you something, kid. Like, and then afterwards I was like, why did I do that? I told myself wasn't going to go heavy today.
And it's about finding like what that weight is. And I think females typically, once you start working with them, they're way stronger than they think they are, and they can go considerably heavier than they should be going heavier than they are with that. But also too, there is a point of diminishing returns here with things to where once the weight gets up so heavy, then it's going to start taxing your joints. If you can go lighter and get more out of that movement and protect your joints and protect your health, why would you not want to do that? Nick Walker's a perfect example of this. When he used to live in Tampa, we trained, he would break out the 200-pound dumbbells on incline press and just rep those things out. I could hear every single part of his elbow and body creak. Every single movement he did that. Now he doesn't do that anymore. The weight is lighter. He goes deeper into stretch. He pushes it up, full contraction. It's different. It's different. He's progressed even faster doing things like that. Now he's still heavy. He's still pushing really heavy weights, but it's not to the extreme part of it. So again, it's about trying to find kind of what that balance is for each individual.
Yeah.
Perfect.
All right, what do you got, Evan?
All right. Here's a good one. Drop sets. When to do them and when are they counterproductive?
When are they counterproductive? So drop set is a intensity technique that, in my opinion, is going to probably limit your successive sets. So I really only do a drop set either at the end of the exercise or the end of the workout. Or it's a great one if you're short on time. You know, so for me, it's the way my brain works is I'm doing a pretty heavy set, getting a good amount of reps. I'm dropping the weight by 30, 40, 50%, whatever it is. From then on, I don't count reps anymore. I might count them, but I'm not going, oh, I'm going to get 12. I'm going until the muscle fails. But that's when I really focus on the target area. So for like back or something, that's when I'm really focusing on the muscle that I'm trying to hit. And it's just to make sure that I didn't leave anything in the tank for those muscles. Muscles fatigue in a particular order. So, you know, when you go to failure, you're making sure they're all fatigued.
Yeah.
I think drop sets are really good for people trying to understand what failure is and trying to push past that failure point. If you don't have someone there to spot you, help you with that. I'm honestly more of a fan now of doing things. I know it's like the third time I've mentioned this today, but it's something I've been implementing over the last few months that I really, really like. Just like the lengthened partials. So, like where I train at Iron Religion, they have one of those really nice new Panada bench presses that has a cambered bar. So it can go really super, super deep. So you can go past parallel with it. It sits above your chest. And I'll do my full reps with that. When I get cashed out and I can't do a full another rep, I will sit down there at the bottom and just work on contracting and pressing all the way out of that bottom position there. I'd rather do that than rack it, get up, pull the weight off, get down, and then go complete full reps after that on there. Now, is there a place for that? Sure, there's a place for that. It's all about pushing past a failure point. And there's no wrong way to push past a failure point, but you don't want to push past that failure point on every single movement, every single time. I think one drop set per workout is fine. You go more than that, you probably just start pressing hard enough in general through your other movements.
Right. Yeah. If you're doing it all the time, that's just, it kind of becomes counterintuitive and it's almost like junk volume at that point.
Yeah.
Actually, the gym that I train at now, I haven't actually experimented with this yet, but they do have a couple of gyms that are not gyms, pieces of equipment. And I bet some gyms will probably start to get more of these
I know
too.
what you're talking about.
Yeah, I don't know what
Yeah.
they're called, but like they actually have a drop set built in. So you don't have to, if you're training alone, you don't have to get up and like, take off the weight to do a drop set. You just like put your foot down on like the lever and then it does the drop set for you. I haven't experimented with it yet because at Gold's, it's mainly most of their chest machines and I don't train chest. So, but it is kind of cool that they have that now.
Yeah, look, I think they could be beneficial, but I think once it starts, you start getting junk volume out of it. That's when it's an issue. And I think when you rely on them too much, then you probably just start going quite hard enough throughout it. I'd rather honestly just take a break or do things like rest pauses than drop sets, honestly. So I'll rack it. And like today on the leg press, I was doing those and I fully extended my legs, waited for like 15 seconds, almost rested in that like fully locked out position, and then went back and finished out my reps after that. I'd rather do that than rack it, get up and pull weights off with it. But they have their place. I mean, it's just an intensifying technique.
Yeah,
Sure.
I think that's it's also fun. Like if you want to talk about an epic
Yeah.
pump,
Yeah.
do like like the famous thing for shoulders is called a triple drop set or a giant set. That's like a finisher for the day for shoulders. You want to feel like you're lifting, do some drop sets, especially on legs. That's one of the fun intensity techniques on legs is like go to failure on a big lift, strip a plate off, go to failure, strip a plate off, go to failure, then sit there for 3 minutes while you catch your breath. I mean, these are, but again, you got to know what your recovery time is allowed to be. You need to cut, you need some time. And also you don't want to do that the first exercise of the day, and then, compromise everything that you got to do successively.
Now,
Yeah.
Paul, there's one thing you said right there that really, really had, sorry, Lexi, this is like really, really important. I think the best part for drop sets are things like for small muscle groups, like triceps, biceps, lateral raises, things like that, that are not compound lifts that you cannot load the muscle with a ton of weights and you rely more on volume for that. Biceps is a huge one. Huge one. You will get more growth on biceps doing high reps than you ever going to try doing slowing a bunch of weight around. It's a small muscle. So doing drop sets on those, massive, like those giant sets, Milos giant sets for the shoulders and lateral raises, those will literally murder you. And that is a great place to do that. That's a really good point. Sorry, Lexi.
Yeah. Oh no, it's good. I was actually just gonna say I remember when I first started training, this was back when I had like that trainer for a little while and I was in high school and I remember he had me do a drop set on I think it was just like seated leg extensions and it was the first time I had ever trained that intensely before and I remember like standing up and he had his back turned to me. We were like walking away and my legs like were so taxed that I just like felt like I couldn't walk. It was the weirdest feeling, but it was the first time I had ever probably trained to like true failure with a drop set. So, but anyways, okay. So another question that I got was the importance of just training hard AF versus perfecting / nitpicking form and technique. So, well, I think there's a fine line here between, I mean, I think at any point in your career, whether your goal is to maintain your muscle, build muscle, form always should be prioritized because if you're just throwing out round weight with really crappy form, I mean, you're probably going to get injured. You're going to pull a muscle. That's going to set you out. So I would say you want to prioritize form over anything.
That's what the beginning of working out is for. You should literally just be learning the cues. You're like a baby deer in there. You know, you're like all wobbly. We've all, you know, like I said, lifting is a skill. We don't think, you know, we think of hitting a baseball or like throwing a football. Those are skills. Lifting weights is a skill. Learning how to engage a muscle in a certain lift, how to make sure you're, you know, again, I was a prime example. All I wanted was a big chest when I was young, and all I got was big shoulders because all I cared about was the weight on the bar, and I was, you know, doing a lot of these. And then, you know, someone came along and was like, you know, if you tuck your elbows and drive from your, you know, I was like, oh yeah, you're actually, yeah. So like, technique has got to come first, and then the intensity can come because you know what you're doing. Yeah, I can't imagine it being the other way around. It's pretty dangerous to load up a lift, especially something difficult like a deadlift or a squat or even a bench. Like you can get hurt on a bench press straight away. You can, you know, you going too wide. You can, a lot of people tear a pec. I've heard of people like, you know, popping a bicep just trying to flip a truck tire. So like, yeah, like you don't want to be injured. That's the worst. Not being able to lift is literally going to mess you up mentally.
Yeah. I remember when I was early on in lifting, I did a lot of barbell back squats. Like I never do those now, but I would go really heavy on them and it was fine at the time, but over time what was happening was my hips, like I had some really bad hip issues. That was in a lot of pain with my hips. So I had to just like stop doing barbell back squats, and that's what it helps like my hips tremendously. So yeah, you always want to prioritize form over everything. But I would say, like specifically if you are somebody listening to this podcast and you are just looking to build a muscular foundation, like let's say you're looking to get into competing in the far future and you're just really not sure where to start and you're new into the gym, I think just focusing, I mean, obviously prioritize your form and your technique, but just focusing on getting strong and building that like base layer of muscle and not being so like not overthinking what you should or shouldn't be doing from like a exercise standpoint. I think that's important because I think once you build that base layer of muscle, then you can become a lot more specific with, okay, I need to be targeting more of like my anterior delt and my upper outer glute, right? But if you're like worrying about that so much right off the get-go, if you are brand new to the gym, like I would just focus on being strong, building up everything and building that base layer first before you get really technical and like nitty gritty.
I agree with that, Lexi. I think that obviously there's outliers to everything, and it'd be impossible to address like every single possible situation. But look, if you're going in there and you're loading up the weight with way more weight than you should be able to do, you're going to hurt yourself. And that's just with any realm of anything. That's good form, bad form, right? But intensity initially is incredibly important. Focusing, and look, most people want to get in the weights too because it's kind of fun to do. And if you're focusing so much on how to do every movement 100% exactly correct when you're first starting, that's a little bit overboard too. Again, it's something you progress with, right? You progress with it. You don't just like, you don't start at Z, you start at A. It's like people that first get into lifting and they'll copy like Laura Lee's training. Like that's not what you want to copy when you're first getting into training at 100 pounds and you need 20 pounds of muscle on your frame. Like you need to be doing other things first. Like you're talking about like finishing work on the inside of the house when you haven't poured a foundation yet. Like there is a difference when it comes to that.
Yeah.
But yes, I mean, obviously, like in the grand scheme of things, if you can do great form under load, you are absolutely going to progress farther and quicker than anything. And you're not going to progress at all if you hurt yourself. So,
yeah, I think ultimately you're going to be stronger if you learn to lift properly. You know, I see a lot of people that, like, for example, we'll talk about like an incline barbell bench. They don't bring the bar all the way down, right? And so they stop. But if you let those muscles lengthen, you're going to be more powerful in the long run than if you just stop mid lift. So sometimes you got to lower the weight initially, build that strength back up. But in the long run, you're going to be able to progress further than if you had just done more weight early on, but kept your form worse.
Yeah.
I got to, oh,
You wanna
sorry.
get one or two more because I'll have to go here in a couple minutes, but
Yeah, I got a good one. This kind of goes with some of the questions we had previously. Signs that you have a cookie cutter training program. So we talked about cookie cutter peak weeks before. What's a sign of a cookie cutter training program?
I feel like this is a little bit, I feel like it's a little bit harder to identify. But I guess the biggest, most maybe obvious thing would be, and I feel like we have all probably heard this before, where you get a bikini athlete, or whether they've competed in bikini before or whatever division, right? We're just going to use bikini as an example. And then they say, oh yeah, my coach, like here was what my training plan was, and they read it out, and they're training a ton of like chest, ton of quads, ton of calves, like things that just don't really make a ton of sense for bikini. I mean, yeah, maybe maintaining what you already have with those, but there's no need to have that much volume for those muscle groups that have absolutely no, really not a ton of importance in your division. So I think that's the first thing like I would think of, is if for your division, like your coach is having you train a ton of muscle groups that just don't matter for that division or that you don't need to grow, I would say that's the first thing I can think of that would scream like cookie cutter.
Yeah, if you're a bikini competitor and you have a chest day, that gets 100% a
I'm
cookie cutter
hearing
program,
that
which is
all,
shocking how much I see that.
I know I've been hearing that a lot recently, like girls telling me that they're training chest, maybe not a whole chest day, but they're like doing multiple chest exercises multiple times a week. And I'm just like, that doesn't add up.
Not for the division, no.
No.
Yeah, I think,
And
how do you know if it's cookie cutter is if you've let them know what your feedback is and the training doesn't adjust to meet that criteria. So, you know, I have a very talented competitor. She's very quad talented, let's say. She got a lot of quads and needs a little bit more glutes. And when I looked at her training program that she was on, it was all quads. And I'm like, well, makes sense. But I think that's part of the reason that she reached out for coaching. So like you kind of see these things over and over. So yeah, I think to me, it's if the training program doesn't quite, like if you say like, you know, squats hurt my back and there's 2 days of squats, or, you know, if there's something in there that they're not actually paying attention to and they're just, you know, sending you kind of the same thing over and over.
I think another way to tell too is if we're gonna look at this in the bikini world right now. If you are a bikini girl, or let's look into the wellness world too. If you're a wellness girl and the majority or half your bodies are upper body days, that's probably not a good thing because that's the
Right.
complete opposite of what the division wants. And if you're a bikini girl and let's say you're newer to lifting, you don't have a ton of muscle and half your glute work is kickbacks and adductors, that's probably a cookie cutter program too, because you just need to grow. You just need to be bigger. And being bigger means bigger everywhere, which you're not going to get with kickbacks and adductions. You're going to need the compound lifts. Like you're going to need honestly like some heavy leg press, even back squats or hack squats. You're going to need those type of things. While most people don't need a ton of quad, you still need some quad. There's a girl I've been working with for a while that has her glutes are really coming in, and now we're starting to notice she's a little thin in the adductors, and so we're adding in some actual like some more squat movements into her program to grow up that area of her physique to make it all balance and flow together. If you get the same thing, look, and also too, I'll split up programs, and it's not necessarily that much different every time because the goals don't always change with things, right? Stuff takes time with that. So again, if your training split looks like a guy's training split and you're a female, that's definitely a sign it's probably a cookie cutter program there. And if there's not a lot of detail in that either, I would consider probably something similar to that.
Yeah, yeah, but I guess don't let that like the detail part, because I see people also, and I think we all have seen this before, where like you give somebody a training split and they're like, oh, this is too easy, and you're like, it shouldn't be too easy. Like some people want like too much almost fluff and detail and like too much like made up movements. So sometimes basic gets it done, but I
I
think
think it's because they're easier. I really think it's because they're easier. Like the fluff movements are not near as taxing on your body, and I think that's why people
no.
like them.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Or they like it because oh, it takes them a little bit longer and it's higher in volume, so they think oh, more is better than, which is not true. And I think another thing, like as we kind of wrap this up, because I know I have to go in a couple minutes, I think one thing to really hit on hard really quickly with this topic is staying on the same training program for a given period of time. Like I feel like so many people want to just hop from one training program to another, or like every 4 weeks. I mean, and for some people, it may seem like, oh, 4 weeks on a training split, that's enough time. But honestly, I would say, I mean, Evan, you've trained with some Olympians like Nick, for example. I mean, he's probably on the same training split for what, like a crazy amount of time.
I mean, it's the basics. It's always the basics. Like they don't ever change. Like
Yeah.
there's variations that we would do, but it didn't change like ever. I mean, we do some different movements on things, but when you get to that level on things, you do so much by feel that everything is a little bit different.
Yeah.
It kind of that level with it. But yeah, I mean, it's the basics on things. Like you don't see people at that level doing, you know, single leg side on the leg press, like pushing up with the right leg. I don't know, you know, all these weird things. Single leg hip thrust. You're not going to see like people like that do that. No, yeah, I mean, it's the basics, and people want fluff, people want change, and unfortunately, that's not always going to reap the best results. And that's something I have to look at in the client too with it. You know, if it's more of a lifestyle client, then I'm more likely to switch up their programming to keep them happy, you know, because they feel like they're switching stuff up. They're a competitive client. Tough, we're working what we need to work because we're trying to win.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. For me, with training volume part or frequency and changing the programs, part of it is also, are they still enjoying it mentally? So I will typically change programs, but the philosophy might be very similar. The lifts might be very similar, right? They're not inventing, for the most part, new lifts, right? So if you find that a lift works really well for you, keep freaking doing it. Why would you like, oh man, my quads are really growing from this hack squat. Let's just get rid of that and let's try barbell back squats. No, if you find something, keep it into every rotation. Likewise, if you find something that's not working well for you, like you can never feel a bent over dumbbell fly for your rear delts. Well, maybe you try the reverse pec deck, right? So like, but what, you know, with someone like Nick or yeah, they're going to keep the same movements, but what's going to change for them is the intensity, the weight, the volume, all those things are the variables that they're going to adjust. They're not going to throw out an entire program every 4 to 6 weeks. And so, yeah, I like that I can give people something that they're kind of, you're kind of relearning. You go into the gym and you're like, oh, I haven't done it in this order, or I haven't done this as my primary power movement. That can keep it exciting. Because yeah, doing the same thing for months on end can get a little boring.
Yeah.
And so my clients will probably get annoyed at me saying this here, but like there's very little difference between like a front foot elevated split squat and a heavy reverse lunge. They are not that different with things. They really are not.
Right.
But I will switch things up like that so they get a little bit of variety, and it's pretty much doing the same thing. So that's some things to kind of think about with that, where you can switch stuff up, make it a little bit different. They could use different loads on it. Obviously, you get a little more into contracting position with the reverse lunge than you would with just split squat. But you know,
Modalities, like switching up the modality, like instead of doing something with dumbbells, doing it with the barbell if you can, or switching it up that way can
Yeah.
sometimes be a
And
good
it-
way to switch it up a little bit while still doing the same movement.
and I always try to give people leverage or variety when it comes to that. I don't say it has to be with this. It could be with a barbell. It could be with a Smith machine. It could be with a dumbbell. I really don't care what it is, because if there's a lot of people in the gym and you don't have availability to that equipment, I don't want you waiting around for 20 minutes to do it. Do it with a damn dumbbell instead this time.
Well, especially with the hip thrust, there's so many, you know, it used to just be the barbell. Now most gyms have some version of it. Now there's like some gyms have like multiple versions. So like I'll say like choose a hip thrust variation that you want to use for the next 4 weeks, and that's what we're going to focus on.
Yep.
Perfect. All right. Well, Lexi, I know you got to go, so that's going to be it for us today for the training portion. Hopefully we provided some value here.
I think it was good. I feel like we touched on a lot of things that we haven't really touched on before. So hopefully it was valuable.
That's what she
Hey
said.
guys, training is super important, guys. Like we talk about all the other stuff with competing. These are muscle shows, right? And
Well, and when someone asks me what's more important, nutrition or training, I say you can eat perfectly. It ain't going to change your body.
no,
Training, if you want to put on muscle, you have to put a stimulus through it. You have to eat to support that. But if you take away the training, your perfect diet is going to just lead to a skinny fat person. So, you know, I'd say really, when you get in that gym, put your headphones on, whatever you got to do, lock in. Something I say to my clients quite a bit on updates. Hey, I understand life is stressful. Things are going on. For that 45 to 65 minutes that you're in the gym, zone out, do the work, and walk out of that gym knowing you just did the job. Listen, bodybuilding is not hard. When you compare it to the other sports in the world, when people are like, oh, well, bodybuilders don't make as much as the NFL. Guess what? Those guys are practicing 50 hours a week watching film. Bodybuilders, yeah, I get it. We got to do it all. But you're in the gym 5, 6, 7 hours a week max, right? And the rest of the time is just recovery and making sure your nutrition is right. So when you're in the gym, nail it.
Work.
Don't waste your time.
Put your phone on airplane mode too. Sometimes I do that if I don't want like my phone dinging. It's just a nice way to kind of zone out for an hour, and then it's there for you when you're finished.
I did that the other day. I was in the squat rack. I put my phone on airplane mode, and a flight attendant brought me a drink.
Amazing.
Bad jokes for the win.
Bad joke to end it all.
All right. Hopefully you guys didn't just spit out your coffee. All right.
All right. Hope you guys enjoyed this one, and we will catch you guys next week.
Later.